Hey guys, this is Alan. The following is what they call the Green Room for 42 minutes. This is the after the live broadcast, the Skype conversation. This one is with Neil Kramer. I just want to give a heads up. The first 7 minutes, the sound quality is not fantastic, but it's really worth listening to. I didn't want to cut it out because I think just what Neil says is so worth listening to. So there's a little hiss there, but get through it. The first after about 7 minutes, it sounds a lot better. And we got about another 40 minutes here with Neil. It's really amazing material. I hope you enjoy it. We were left with the idea of having some hope for Sam to make it out. Now this brings me to something I wanted to touch on, and maybe this is a sort of a foolish question in and of itself, because it comes back to that dichotomy of right or wrong, real or unreal, within, without. But I just want to, you touched on the idea of the Gnostic mythos, so that brings us to things like archons, plant spirits, ayahuasca serpents, all these sort of outside, perhaps, entities that are of a different density, let's call it, or dimension.
Yeah.
Are they literal entities that we can interact with? Are these different worlds that we can travel to through different shamanic practices? Are they real worlds, or are they only metaphors for our interior landscape?
Well, for me, there's no difference between
Right.
a rock falling on my head and a metaphor in my mind. They're both completely real. What makes one feel more real than another is its density. So if you're dense and you have an interaction with something that's less dense, then we tend to call that less real. And I think that's what's beginning to change, and people are beginning to wise up to that. So if you change your density, if you imbibe some sacred medicine, shall we say, and you change your conscious agility and you move into another realm, the realness of that place amplifies, seemingly, because you're moving in a space where you're at the same density as those things. So if you communicate with a fourth density consciousness, which is a very frequent and easy, common thing to do in normal life, it's just that we don't know we're doing it very often. But if you do it consciously, then that is real. And it only becomes unreal to the mainstream when you come back here, because it's no longer accessible anymore. So the whole thing, this whole model of densities is totally enfolded. So they've got these 7 Russian dolls all encompassing each other, and we're there kind of nearly in the middle of it. And so everything that we do affects the whole ecology, the whole thing affects everything else. And that's why ultra-terrestrial intelligences give a shit about us, because what we do changes things for everybody. Now, it doesn't have quite the same dramatic effect for them as it does to second density consciousnesses that we kind of are giving a pretty hard time to on this planet at the moment. But it certainly sends ripples out. So I think, rather than saying is it literal or is it metaphorical, it's like, how dense is it? What is your density? You know, and that changes from what position of consciousness, what configuration of energy you're using. So a dream in my sleep tonight is just as real as what I'm doing now. It's just that when my vantage point shifts, my judgment about the reality of that event changes. And that's the only thing that moves, not how real is it or how unreal is it. Everything is real.
Absolutely, beautifully said. It's the, as you quote in your book, it's the cluster of consecutive worlds. I love that phrase.
Yes, it is. It's exactly that. And it's, you know, I've kind of showed a video a couple of times in some of my workshops where it's Carl Sagan describing what a 3D world looks like to two-dimensional beings, this flatland world. You can see it on YouTube where he's got these little squares and shapes and stuff. And you can't really see the 4D from the 3D. You cannot do that. You can abstract it and think about it. And so we call it like archetypes and resonators and conscious mythologies and you know, birth stories and so on and so forth. But really what it is something that we can only theorize about. You have to get outside of yourself to see it. That's the trick, of course.
So when you had said, this idea of the you had the number 7, like with chakras, this sort of sevenfold model of reality. Something that I come back to, and I believe this is what you were getting at with, bringing it down to where you are now. Making, I believe you had said something like, if you can't make this gnosis work for you in your everyday life, then ultimately it doesn't work for you. It's not benefiting you or working in your favor.
That's right.
If you can't bring it down.
That's why old-fashioned academic philosophy is very limited in terms of its practical utility, because it's all very nice to sit there and theorize about X, Y, and Z, but if that's not actually evolving the way you brush your teeth, then it's arguably not very relevant. So I do think it's important to be able to map those things to the micro and the macro absolutely at the intimate level, yeah.
So with that in mind, should we be looking, instead of progressing necessarily through the 7 layers, it's more about incorporating more and more layers. So the grocery store level never goes away. We just learn to incorporate further, dig a little deeper and get more knowledge and a wider understanding. But the sort of 3D, if you will, that's not going away. You're just learning to incorporate more into, correct?
Yes, that's right. They enfold each other, these densities, these layers, these dimensions, whatever you want to call it. The mystics that I have studied in the past, they call them spheres and realms and heavens and all these different terms, but they enfold each other. Each one, however, does appear to have specific resonance for a specific lesson or a specific teaching, and the third density is very much characterized by self-awareness. So self-awareness, very much represents this sort of plateau of attainment here, and when you're in the third density, that is your goal, is to develop this self-awareness to a sort of supreme level. And that, as you say, incorporates a number of previous densities. So that means you don't suddenly start treating the 2D like shit. You don't kick the cat around the room and sort of just set everything on fire in the forest because you don't care because you're an elevated entity. That does not constitute self-awareness. So yes, it means you become an honourable person. It means you become somebody with integrity in everything that you do. So how you bring that into the grocery store, into the waiting room, or into driving your car is that everything you do becomes imbued with this consciousness, of course, this awareness and this vigilance, but also it becomes kind of like the old samurai way of being, where you treat every day like with the sort of highest sort of respect and as an exercise in self-expression and self-control. So it's as if, God is watching you and he's saying, right, let's see how this guy behaves today. So do you just sort of sit around and, eat pizza and watch zombie movies, which, I do that every now and again, but or do you actually bring whatever you're doing into a sphere of heightened awareness, and do you bring that quality into the the very mundane and prosaic things that we do? And the more you do that, the more you realize that you kind of like it's your responsibility to guide that consciousness of everything around you. So my model of awakening, my understanding of awakening is that there are a critical mass of like nodal points. So there's always necessarily a low percentage of people who go around doing this stuff, who basically serve as what David Bohm used to call the pilot wave for everything else. So you're pioneering this, and it's a pretty thankless job in a way. There's not much in it for anybody, but it's an impulse in people who are interested in metaphysics and mysticism and spirituality. It's an impulse. It's innate. and you uncover it in yourself. And it's not really something that has necessarily, as you would say, a reward, but it's something that you do. And the ecology of that, to use that word again, is that it affects everything around you. So just like, if you walk into a room and there's someone in there smiling, it immediately affects the consciousness in that room. And the smile affects your tendency to smile and your tendency to share and your tendency to be open. And in the same way, being conscious has the same effect. So if you're conscious, you will magnetize consciousness to you, and you'll make it more appropriate for other people to feel that they can do the same thing. You give them the confidence for them to do it themselves. So that's the beauty of this, in that it's kind of like a dove virus that goes through the system and spreads this awareness.
Beautiful. Doug, I know, likes to refer to this as the contagion. It's like you just referred to it as the virus. It's like we are instilling a positive virus into the meme stream.
A dove virus, yeah. That's why I.
But viewed from the point of view of the ego, this looks nasty. This is an illness. This is trying to undo the empire.
Well, I mean, I have never consciously sought to undo the empire, really. I don't really even give it much credence, and I don't think it's particularly fascinating anymore. It was very important as part of my self-initiation, but not anymore. And I think everybody goes through different aspects of that, and certainly some people it becomes their personal undertaking and choice to spend a lifetime studying that, but that takes a toll on the individual. I think that you when you start to realize that the fourth density is characterized by this like non-physical energetic being where manifestation is very immediate, you need to have your ego in check. And so if you find yourself in a space where manifestation, as in a dream, a lucid dream, is immediate, if your demons and your purity aren't in order, then you're going to create a hell zone pretty damn quickly. You're going to create all manner of weirdness, very, very unpleasant, before you know it. And so part of the purpose of the third density is to get your shit together, is to get your chops in order, is to learn your scales on the guitar, so you know everything that you're doing. And that's, it's kind of a beautiful process in a way, in that it's reflected and it's mirrored in everything that you do and everything that is around you. So the whole point of temporality here, of time and of cause and effect, is really to show you the effects of your consciousness on what happens around you, and the quality of your life and the quality of your relationships with people. How much love do you have? How well do you sleep at night? All that stuff. That's to some degree showing you what your consciousness is doing. So that ego thing starts to get knocked out pretty fast the further you go down this, and it's of no interest to me whatsoever how that looks to anyone else. It's just how it is, and you just cannot progress with ego on this path. You hit a brick wall pretty fast. So you either go into it directly to fix that yourself and look at it and realize that it is something that you need, an ego, but it has a particular role, and its role is as a caretaker, really, not as a captain. And that's cool, and it's important. And if the caretaker has a few days off, you soon know about it when everything starts to go smelly and odd and weird, So the ego has a role, but it's not the role that we thought it was. So really what we're doing is repositioning that energy to do something else. And quite frankly, when the ego realizes that, it's much happier. So it doesn't want to feel like it's getting demoted, or it'll fight against that. But when it realizes you're not trying to destroy it or discredit it, it works with you and you work with it. You're no longer in conflict.
Now, you said something pretty interesting there, the idea of the caretaker. And only, I'm not trying to relate everything back to movies, but only because this is...
You synchromistic people, you always say that, and it's just not true, but go on.
Actually, I'm not one of the ones who brings it back to movies. It's not really my thing.
That's what you're going to do. Go ahead, Alan. That's what you're going to do.
Well, I do think, ultimately, I'll say this quickly, is I do think I'm glad that